Shawna Rosner, your host of In-House Counsel Chronicles. Today, my guest is Celaena Powder. Celaena graduated with a bachelor's degree from NYU Gallatin and her JD from UCLA School of Law. Celaena started her legal career in private practice at Orrick and then Gunderson Detmer before moving in-house. She is now general counsel with Seismic. Welcome to the podcast, Celaena.
Thank you, Shawna, and thanks for that great introduction.
Of course. I'd like for you to start by telling us a little bit about Seismic. What does the company do for those of us that don't know?
Yeah, so Seismic is a SaaS company and leader in the revenue enablement space, which I say for the lawyers in the audience means we make software that helps go-to-market teams crush their goals and do it more efficiently. We were founded in 2010 in San Diego and now have 1,200 employees in 8 different countries. And so as GC, I deal with all of the things a global SaaS company deals with. Our customers are diverse in their needs and in their maturity. And so we have offerings that serve customers who are just getting started in their revenue enablement journey, as well as those big multinational blue chip companies.
And you are their second in-house legal hire, is that correct?
Yeah, so when they had hired a commercial counsel before I joined, but he left before I started. And so he had left, and then I showed up. At the time that I arrived, they had 2 contracts admins. Contracts admins, non-attorney roles, sort of keeping the trains running. Seismic was over 100 million in ARR by the time I showed up. And they had a lot of those really amazing customers. And so I thought going in that they would have had the sort of revenue engine commercial function of the legal department sorted out. But when I showed up, I realized that there was a lot of opportunity for improvement. Because what you might imagine is 2 contracts admins trying to negotiate and build processes to support really big, meaty deals against these incredible logos, your Microsofts, your IBMs. It was just not a fair matchup for our talent, who was very exceptional, punching way above their weight class, but it wasn't what Seismic needed. So I came in, there was a little bit of legal, but it wasn't serving the business in the way that the business needed to be served.
So I know you really kind of had a fast track to becoming a general counsel. I mean, really, how many years were you in private practice?
I want to say I became GC as a 5th year.
That's pretty amazing. So how did you end up where you are in such a short time of being a lawyer?
Yeah, my career has definitely been a rocket ship. I have had really unique opportunities. I started at Orrick, but I jumped to Gunderson because Gunderson's LA office where I live was looking for their 3rd associate for the office. They were right off of Abbot Kinney in Silicon Beach. And it was one room. The office was one room. And it was, at the time, we only had part-time partners, which roughly meant that they would be in the office maybe once a month, every now and then, at least in the beginning. And it was 3 associates. We had a senior, a mid-level, and me. And what that meant is that every deal that came through, every issue that somebody called about, I got to listen to. And so I became, and that's how I learn. I learn through osmosis. I'm a sponge. I like listening. I like hearing other people's ideas and opinions. I like debate. I like to question. I like to challenge. And so through that, I learned a lot. And so when folks talk about their legal careers, or when people ask me about how I got here, that was a really unique opportunity that is very hard to replicate. And so what that meant is, really early on, I was running my own deals. I had my own clients. I was doing my own business development, and I was forming these relationships. And I was doing really, really difficult things much earlier in my career than I think most big law folks are going through as they do, the first 2 years of doc review or signature packets or whatever it was. I was doing everything. And through that, I was able to form relationships with companies that were taking off. And I had a really awesome client base. Seismic was one of those companies. And over the years, we did acquisitions, financings, crazy transactions, international expansion, really big, meaty partnerships and deals that over time we formed a really strong relationship. And I kept telling them, you guys need a GC. You're at the point and stage where you got to bring in a GC. It frankly just gets more expensive and more difficult for the company to make this evolution the longer you wait. I gave them these incredible resumes, these public company GCs, these people who had taken companies public, sat on boards, were just the most impressive veterans. And eventually I got a call one day and they said, you were right. We need a GC, but the only person we want is you. And so I said, all right, I'm in. I joined in-house 5-6 months later, and I've been there since.
That is really an amazing road that you had to get there. It's so unusual. Did you always want to be an in-house attorney, though? Is that something that was on your radar?
I don't know what I wanted. I think like most folks who go to law school, you have an idea maybe of what being a lawyer is, but it seemed like the right smart choice. I was the first person in my family to go to grad school. Like that just seemed like what you do. And I grew up in a really small town, and I didn't really know what the options for career development were in the big, great world. I grew up in Alaska, not a lot of folks there, especially in my area. And so when I looked and saw what are the potential career opportunities, like most kids, you kind of see a finite universe, and lawyer happens to be one of those. And lawyer also happens to be one that in media would be the opportunity for women in particular to look really awesome and strong and walk into a room and be heavy hitters. And that's who I wanted to be. I didn't know that I wanted to be a lawyer, but I wanted to be somebody who walked into a room and who, when I spoke, people listened to. And so I think that was always my North Star. So I don't know. I don't think I always wanted to be a GC, but I think GC has served me quite well.
Seems like it. Where in Alaska did you grow up? I didn't realize that's where you were from.
Yeah, I grew up in a town called Palmer, and it's the area, we call them boroughs, but county is, I think, the size of Wyoming geographically, so super spread out. I grew up living at the base of a mountain range out into the woods, so a very probably different upbringing, but think like rural woods living. And so as you might imagine, not a lot of tech jobs there.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about what you've found is the biggest challenge when you moved in-house from private practice.
Yeah. Big law firms and law firms in general, I think, get a little bit of a bad rap for, just being billing machines or whatever. And I would always make the joke, I'm just billing number XYZ. When you're, a star associate, though, at a law firm, you're the golden child. You are the business. When you go in-house, you are not the business anymore. You are a supporter. And that's a different ethos that you have to adopt. And so changing the roles where I went from, doing really well and being somebody who was really liked and well respected within the firm and valued to starting from the bottom again, even though I was moving into a senior role, I was still starting from the bottom. That was tough. And then I think building something at a company who had been operating so long without it. So Seismic was founded in 2010. I went in-house in 2021. That's 11 years without a real legal department. And so changing the tides is pretty tricky. And so that was just culturally different. And then the challenge ahead was really difficult, trying to make that impact and build from the ground up again. It was a challenge, but it was really rewarding. And now I have a legal team that is very respected and very loved. I send out a survey every year to all the people who interact with us to ask us how we're doing. It's 5-ish questions and a free text to give us feedback. And one of the questions is legal as a trusted advisor. And you can answer anywhere from disagree or strongly disagree to strongly agree. And we score agree or strongly agree at a 94% rate. So people who interact with us view us positively, view us as helpful. And that is a big shift and something I'm really proud of because that was not an easy change.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And sticking on the topic of what you found rewarding in your career, what would you say you found most rewarding thus far about your in-house career?
Yeah, there have been a lot of moments. I think there's been the interpersonal of helping people achieve their goals. I had somebody on my team who was not an attorney when I started, who became an attorney during that process. And being able to make that happen for somebody is really awesome. I've had people who have grown and really developed and gone from maybe somebody who was doing a certain specific thing and trying to figure out their way to act to total rock star, knocking it out of the park status. I love that. And I love creating the culture where people can thrive and grow. I also like doing hard things. And so the really challenging M&A or the really challenging transactions that nobody thought could be done and had about 100 hurdles you had to overcome. Those are so hard in the moment, but when I look back, I'm really proud of what I did. And there are still times where I think, oh, this thing ahead of me might be challenging. It's not going to be as hard as that past thing I did. And so there have been these moments where in the moment it's so hard, but you get through it and you grow from it. And I look back at those fondly.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And it seems like you're a good manager. You've just, to me, some of the things that you've just described, you manage of a team of more than 20. How did you develop a leadership style and how would you describe that leadership style?
Yeah, yes, 20. We're actually, I think, going to be about 22 by the end of, give me 3 more weeks once people start, and we'll be at 22. And, I have legal and InfoSec, and in between that, privacy and compliance. And so I have people who have very different backgrounds, very different skill sets, strengths, weaknesses, personalities. It's super different. And so, as you might imagine, the sort of adage of, oh, you hire people you want to grab a coffee with doesn't necessarily work. And I also don't want to hire people who just think like me or socially I get along with, because I think that different ideas, different backgrounds, different perspectives lead to better outcomes. And so I always look for people who will challenge me and can bring something new to the table. And because I'm not an expert in InfoSec though, and because I know that nobody can be an expert in every aspect of the law, it's just not possible. I give people a lot of latitude. And my general philosophy is I want to create an environment where people can try something, make a mistake, and try again. And what that means to me is room to raise a hand and say, put me in, coach, I've never done this before, to try something, to learn from it and grow, and to try again. Now, you don't want to make the big mistakes on, the company litigation or, fundamental IP strategies, but a lot of what we do on a daily basis, somebody can give it a shot and learn quickly from it. And I found that by creating that environment, people are really engaged. They want to be part of that team. They see the growth for themselves and they work really hard. They give that extra discretionary effort because they're excited to try something new and to push themselves. And I like hiring what we call natural athletes, somebody who just has the attitude and aptitude over the background and experience. You don't need to check every box to be on my team, but you have to want to try to check every box once you get here.
I love that. That's really great. That's something I'm gonna kind of stick in my mind to remember as a great leadership skill to adopt. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about acquisitions at Seismic. How many acquisitions have you been involved in since starting there?
So as GC, we've only done well, one-ish acquisition. I say one big acquisition. We've done the build, operate, transfer converts from offshore development centers to go from contractor or vendor supplier to employees. So, which is its own tricky area. Prior to that, Seismic had acquired, I'm doing math, 4 companies with me actually as outside counsel.
Oh, gotcha. And what are the biggest differences then you saw in M&A work as outside counsel and M&A work as the GC?
Yeah, as the GC, you're not the one responsible for doing all the document drafting and late night turns, which is very fun. It's a lot more fun being in-house on it. Now you have to herd a lot more cats. So your leadership team, your management team, the different players in different pieces, and there's a lot more education that you have to do internally on how things work, on what to expect, particularly if you're going to have to go through regulatory review. There's a lot of that. But it's also fun. You're in the room when you're talking about strategy. You know, when you're outside counsel, you're thinking about the thesis for the deal, but you're also thinking about the execution. How are we going to structure it? How do we pull it off? What's the timeline? What do all the pieces look like? When you're in-house, yeah, you have to think about all of that, but you're also thinking about what does this company look like 30, 60, 90, 12 months after this acquisition? How are we going to operate the business? How do we integrate? What bets are we making in order to pull this off? It is much more holistic and frankly future focused. When you do the transaction as outside counsel, it is the transaction, and your responsibility might end sort of after it closes, and then you have some escrow, maybe periods that lag and that you stay up to date on. When you're in-house, you live with what you've just done, all the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that is a lot more work than the transaction itself.
Yeah, really interesting insights and makes a lot of sense to me. I want to ask you now, I know you have interests that are outside of the GC office. You shared a little bit with me when we first spoke. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, I don't sit still. So, kind of like my career, everything I do is dialed up a notch. And so I have a lot of hobbies as well. Despite working all hours, I make time for those. I'm big on the outdoors. I like exercise. I like being outside. I live in Southern California for a reason. I also have a wood shop in my backyard that I built. It was a pandemic build with my partner. We just figured that we could make stuff really well. We just decided, yeah, why not? And we need a structure to do that in. So we built a wood shop. And so a lot of woodworking. So the bookcase behind me is early plywood work that I did, but we have lots of beautiful furniture and things that we've made in our house. And then, as you can probably see behind me, I have a lot of comic books, and I am a big comic book lover. I think there's a comic book for everyone out there. I think people don't realize that there's a comic book for them out there because comic books have typically been associated with a certain audience or a certain genre, but there's something for everyone. And I'm a big fan of reading comics, and I'm a big fan of recommending comic books to people. And occasionally I would say probably once or twice a month, I have people pop up and say, hey, I remember you're really into comic books. Can you make a recommendation? And I like to get their feedback and work on that. It's really fun for me. I think it's a wonderful area that is underrated, and I think people should read comics.
I love that variety of interests that you have. That bookcase is amazing. Talking to someone who doesn't think, could build anything. I'm just amazed. And then the comic books, where'd you get that interest?
I think I've just always been a nerd. At my heart, that's who I am. I grew up on Star Trek, and I always, in my mind, had my own world that I was building. And I think for comics, honestly, I would say I got more into comics after becoming a lawyer than I had before. And I think part of it was because I love to read. And as you know from being a lawyer, you spend a lot of your days reading things that are maybe not as fun as the fantasy novels or the sci-fi novels I used to read. Comics come with beautiful artwork though. And so I can escape into a universe every night with an issue or something, maybe more than an issue if I'm going to bed early, and look at beautiful photos or beautiful artwork and read a wonderful story that isn't just pages and pages of text.
So real quick, one last question on this topic, and that is, where do you get your comics?
I love a local comic shop. So I highly recommend walking to your local comic shop. I know it can be overwhelming when you see lots of different things on the shelves. It is okay to ask for recommendations. My local comic shop actually has pages that you can pick up. Or are you into sci-fi? Are you into fantasy? Are you into romance? Are detectives? And it has lists of recommendations for you. There are also some interesting e-reader options as well. If you're more of a digital person, if you like an e-reader for a Kindle, you can use that same platform to get comics through Comixology, which was acquired by Amazon and folded in. But there's also some great new ones out there. There's a company called Neon Ichiban that just launched, and a company called Sweet that just launched, that are more upstarts, a little bit more about democratizing access to comics. And I would highly recommend checking those out. I love my startup companies.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to have to check out my local comic store because I'm not sure where that actually is in Cleveland, Ohio, but I'll look for it. I want to get back now a little bit and I always like to ask this question towards the end. If you could go back in time and give yourself advice, someone who just passed the bar exam, what would it be?
I think it's find the job that's doing the work that you're interested in. I think a lot of attorneys take the job that maybe comes with the prestige or salary, and they figure all legal work is the same. I just need a job. And look, times might be more difficult right now. And if that's the position somebody's in, they should take that job. But if you have choice, I think the work that you're going to be doing is very important. I think a lot of people choose their firm or choose their job based on some of those more fundamental factors. Salary, location, what's the commute to the office, all matter. A lot of people choose it based on the people they're going to work with, which is certainly important. But I always say, don't choose a job based on who your boss is going to be. Choose a job on, the culture of the company, because people are interchangeable. But find the work you want to do. Advice that I was given that was bad is, oh, it's okay, just go into a transactional practice at a large law firm for 3 years, and then you can always transition to something you really want to do. I think that's bad advice. You're just wasting 3 years doing something you're not excited about. I went to Gunderson Detmer from Oryx specifically because of the type of work and opportunity they were going to offer me. And that was the best choice I could have made. And so I highly recommend, past me as well as other folks listening to this, to do the work that you want to do.
How did you actually find that corporate was the work you wanted to do?
Yeah, I got lucky. In law school, things were hard for me. Sitting in the sort of 1L property, con law, contracts classes, all of them were hard. I wasn't that interested. The textbooks were dull. None of it seemed that practical to me. By the way, I was right. It's often not very practical. But as in my later years, I got to do an entrepreneurship course with a professor out of the business school, where actually a friend of mine and I started a company. And so that was really fun. And so I got to learn about cap tables and director dynamics and fundraising, all for that. And then I also took a course on startups and venture capital, taught from the legal perspective. And so I got to learn from that perspective as well. How does it all work? It was much more practical, and it clicked for me. It was easy. I understood it. It all made sense. Those classes just spoke to me in a way that maybe some of the others didn't. And I said, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
I love that. And I have to ask about the company. What kind of company?
Yeah, never actually went anywhere. Both of us, we were debating, do we take the bar? Do we go pursue this company? We chose the conservative lawyer path, and I think that was probably the right path. But I got to give a shout out to my friend, Nick Warshaw. He's an attorney at Loeb and Loeb. It was his idea, and it was super PAC insurance. So at the time, super PACs and third-party spending was at an all-time high in our political races, still is. And our theory was, mostly, I should say Nick's theory was that if you bought an insurance policy that paid out when a third party a third party backer entered the race, you would be able to actually deter their participation. So if party A knew that party B had a giant war chest, party A's super PACs might say, okay, we'll bow out of this. And we actually saw that happen when Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown, ran for Elizabeth Warren's Senate seat, where they took the People's Pledge and they agreed that they would donate campaign funds to a charity of the other party's choice if super PACs entered the race. And it worked. It reduced, I think, third-party spending and through this super PAC mechanism by like 84% or something. And so our theory was we could take that and model it. And now you're probably never going to do that in those really big ticket races, but you could do that at the more local level and make a real impact to make sure that the folks whose voices were heard were actually the constituents and the voters versus big pockets from various other areas of the country.
That's so interesting. Thanks for sharing it. One last question for you, and that is advice you have for somebody who is looking to make a move in-house to eventually, if not right away, a general counsel seat.
I think figure out what kind of work you want to do. Not all work is created equal. Like I said before, what you do on a day-to-day really matters. And start networking, start figuring out, talking to people, go to events, see what it is they do, understand those trade-offs. The grass is not always greener in-house. I don't know that I have a better work-life blend than I did at a law firm, but I certainly like the work that I do more. And that's fulfilling to me. I think I have a bigger impact this way. And so talk to people, figure out what they do, and then start plotting your move. Start identifying the type of work, start figuring out how your background could map into an opportunity at a company, and network. I mean, you are a recruiter, you are going to have way better networking tips than I do, but you could probably speak to this. And so I'd be really curious what you would tell people to do, because I think a lot of jobs don't just fall into your lap. You have to go pursue them.
I absolutely agree. And I think that your points are very well taken. I think that the grass isn't always greener. And that's something conversations I have actually almost daily with people is, why do you want to make the move in-house? What's the driver there? And if it is about a better work-life balance, I just kind of warn it might not be. I think I always tell people you might be working just differently, maybe not less hours, but differently. And you always want to say contact a recruiter like myself, of course, especially if you are looking to make that move in-house. But I think it's just positioning yourself as well as you can within firm life, get as much exposure as you can, and know what it is that you're really good at, what you can learn, have yet to learn, and what areas that you really want to focus in, or do you want to be a generalist?
I think why do you want to do this is the most important part. I think that folks, I don't know, sometimes think that in-house life is better, or they see that a buddy of theirs went to be an in-house attorney at a startup and was able to get a down payment for a house out of the equity, or, being an attorney at Google or Meta, that's cool. They're working on cutting edge stuff. But what is it that you really are trying to go for? And is it a push or a pull? Are you running from something that you need to change, or are you being drawn to something? And being drawn to something is a lot better than running from something. I caution people when they're just looking for a job because the opportunity that they have right now isn't working for them. I think you kind of got to change your mindset in order to be a little bit more deliberate at. And I think your point about work-life blend, it might just be that a firm is a better choice. And it might be that there's a different firm for them out there, and just the position they're in is not serving them. But I think the why is really important. And I get asked periodically about opportunities at Seismic. And what is it about Seismic, the revenue enablement SaaS company, that really draws your attention? And sometimes they have very good answers, like, we used your product at my prior company, or I heard about you and your leadership and I want to be part of a team. And I, of course, love both of those answers. But a lot of times it looked like you had a job opportunity. And right now that might be the case, but I really want people to think about the type of work that they're going to be doing and make sure that it's the place that they want to be.
Such great insight and advice. Our time has come to an end. I really enjoyed talking to you today, and I'm sure our listeners will enjoy hearing all that you had to share. Thanks so much, Celaena.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.